Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt. Today I wanted to talk about difficult language learning material. And I think this is a really important topic to talk about because, you're probably going to run into this issue at some point. And probably what's happened to a lot of people is, you got past the beginner stage, you got past that beginner app, that beginner book, that beginner course, and you want to move on to something that's a little bit more advanced or a little bit more compelling or interesting. And you gave that a shot, but it was very difficult and very challenging, and you kind of feel stuck in this intermediate phase where the beginning material is just a little bit too easy, it's kind of boring, but some of that interesting and fun content is way too hard. And you have a hard time finding intermediate material or listening content that's applicable at your skill level, and you feel really stuck. Now, I think that in a lot of cases, the biggest thing that's going to help get you out of that situation is to acquire more words, right? That's probably the biggest thing that you can do. Learning more words, or even just working on your listening a little bit, can be that difference maker to finally get you to the place where you're enjoying compelling content. But I wanted to talk about this kind of concept outside of just the concept of getting there, because you're going to run into this. Even if you're at the advanced level, you're going to find content that is very challenging at one point, and then the next movie or film you check out is very reasonable. So I think it really applies to just about every single area, whether that's reading, playing video games, watching Netflix shows, because taking Netflix, for example, you could watch a Netflix show and that show could be quite easy or at a reasonable challenge for you, and then you put on another show and it's very difficult. It just sounds like a wall of sound. Same goes for literature. You could check out one book and it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's a challenge, you're learning, and then the next book you're just getting wrecked. And I think it's really important to be okay with exploration and be okay with the fact that you're going to run into material that is very challenging and very hard, and don't let that discourage you from enjoying compelling content. I think for a lot of beginners, they want to use Netflix, or intermediates for that matter, they want to use Netflix, they want to read, and they try out a Netflix film or a Netflix show. And the first show or movie they pick was really hard. And then they kind of get this this feedback, and they think, okay, well, I'm definitely not good enough to use Netflix or to play video games or to read yet. But then they feel stuck because they're in between that beginner phase and that compelling content phase. And a lot of times, it actually just makes sense to just keep exploring and keep trying out different shows, different films, different books, different pieces of text, because it might not even be your skill level. It might just be that you have to be okay with exploring and checking new things out. Now, that being said, there are going to be cases where, hey, maybe your skill level is a little bit lacking and you need to work on vocabulary and you need to work on listening. That could be the case, but sometimes that's not the case, and really it's just a matter of exploring, right? It's very important to be okay with this concept of constantly checking out new shows and new books, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot more probably at the intermediate phase, but it's even going to happen to people that have been learning the language for a long time. I think it's very... you see this a lot too with reading, because the difference in skill level necessary for certain books is very, very wide. On one hand, you could be reading a book, it's a lot of fun, and the next book that you pick up is just way too difficult. And you'll definitely see this in a difference between fiction writing and nonfiction writing, where a lot of the fiction tends to be a lot more difficult than the nonfiction, right? There's probably a lot more vocabulary used, there's a creative aspect of things, and especially if you're looking at classical literature, the grammar can get very complicated and the vocabulary can be quite intense. So, if you're trying out like classic literature, try something out that's a little bit easier, or even try out nonfiction, because that could be the difference maker to you actually enjoying reading and getting something out of it in a foreign language. Even something like newspapers could be very beneficial. Like, newspapers tend to be written at a lower reading level just to have a wider audience. So, if you're struggling with books, whether that's nonfiction or things like that, try reading newspapers or articles, because that could be the difference maker of finding content like that. And that's not to say that you're going to be able to understand every single newspaper or article. Inevitably, there's probably going to be articles that are just really hard, and the same goes with movies, video games, and everything. And the reasons why it's hard is going to vary, right? It's kind of like this art and science aspect. On one hand, it might just be a bunch of specialized vocabulary that you don't know. It could be something like that you're really just tired, you're not in a good mood, and you're just having trouble processing it. Maybe it's some grammar that's thrown in there that you really don't know very well. The reasons why that content could be very challenging is wide, but the key is to not be intimidated by that, not to be discouraged, and to keep exploring. This is the key, right? Don't take that personally. Just move on to another movie, another film, and go from there. Now, sometimes it actually might be useful to push through that difficult material, and that might be a good learning experience. I think for some people, they really do want to read some of that classic literature, and they're willing to struggle through it to enjoy that process. And I think that could be great, and you can get a lot of value out of it. And it might be helpful to try to push yourself sometimes to get through that tough movie, that tough book, and get something out of it. Another thing too that's worth pointing out is that oftentimes, when you're watching TV shows and movies, you might really struggle with it, but give it a second watch or a third watch. Watch it multiple times, because even if the material is very difficult on the first go-around, you'd be surprised to find that you comprehend a lot more on your second playthrough of the movie or the TV show. Same goes with reading as well, and then the third as well. You can even add some more kind of helpful things to your process by looking up a synopsis of the TV show prior to watching, or reading the synopsis after and then watching it again. You can also use subtitles and things like that to kind of help make that difficult material a little bit more manageable. So I think for a lot of people that are struggling with that content part of things, where they don't know where to find compelling content, they feel stuck, give it a shot and just keep exploring around. And if you're still struggling, really pick up more vocabulary, work on your listening, because if you do those two things, you're probably going to hopefully enjoy compelling content, a lot more. So give those things a shot. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.